Dear student, welcome back to our course Marketing Research. Today we will discuss chapter about sampling and sampling methods. First we need to define what the meaning of sampling. Sampling, it refers to the process of selecting a portion of the population to represent the entire population. The population is a total group of people from which we want to collect information. Population of interest is defining the population of interest is the first step in the sampling process. There are no specific rule to follow in defining the population of interest. The population of interest differs according to the research objective. For sampling to be successful, the selected sample should be representative of the population as a whole. Sample is representative in its characteristics and also it is representative to the whole population in its characteristics, and also it must be large enough to represent opinion and attitude of the entire population. So that we must consider the suitable size of the sample, and as general, the large sample size usually provide better representation than small sample size. It is more representative in terms of characteristics of the population and in terms of opinions and attitudes of the whole population. Now we need to differentiate between two terms. The difference, we need to know the difference between sample and census. In a census, data are obtained from or about every member of the population of interest, which means that we get information from all members of the population. While in a sample, we collect information only from a portion of the population, from a selected elements of the whole population. Generally, census are seldom employed in marketing research, or it is rarely employed in marketing research, as populations of interest to marketers normally include many thousands or even millions of individuals, so that it will cost much money and will cost much time to collect data from the whole population. While if we selected a relatively small but carefully chosen sample, we can collect relatively accurate information from such sample, which reflect the characteristics and opinion attitudes of the whole population. Developing a sampling design process. The process of developing an operational sampling plan can be summarized by the following steps. First step is defining the target population. The second step is determining the sampling frame. The third step is selecting a sampling technique. The fourth step is determining the sample size, and finally execute the sampling process. Let's discuss these steps in more details. First step is defining the target population, or defining the population of interest. Sampling design begins by specifying the target population. The target population involve translating the problem definition. Defining the target population involves translating the problem definition into a precise statement of who should and should not be included in the sample, so that we determine the target population according to the objective of our research. The basic issue in developing a sampling plan is to specify the characteristics of those individuals or things from whom or about whom information is needed to meet the research objectives. We can select the population of interest based on first based on geographical area, which means selecting a specific people who lives in a specific geographical area. The second base for selecting population is according to demographic characteristics. For example, selecting a population of a specific age or gender or a specific educational level. The third base for selecting population may be product or service usage characteristics, which refer to how many times the population uses the product during a specific time period. Like, for example, our population may be the people who purchased diet cans in last 6 months. This is a type of product or service use categorization of our population. The last base for categorizing or selecting our population is awareness measures. In such base, the researcher may be interested in serving those individuals who are aware of the company's advertising or the promotional campaign as a whole. The second step in the sampling process is choosing a data collection method. The selection of data collection method has implications for the sampling process. We can select to collect data from our sample through mail surveys, or through telephone surveys, or either from internet surveys. Generally, under survey methods, the sample is larger than observation or experiment method. The third step for sampling process is determining the sampling frame. What's the meaning of sampling frame? It is defined as a list of population elements from which units to be sampled can be selected. In other words, it is the source from which we can identify our population. So, sampling frame is a list of population element, or it is the source from which we can identify our population. It is representative. It is a representation of elements of the target population. It consists of a list or set of directions for identifying the target population. For example, of sampling frame, it may include the telephone book or listing the firms in an industry, or mailing list purchased from a commercial organization, or a city directory. All of these are examples of sampling frame. The fourth step of the sampling process is to select a sampling method. The fourth step in developing sampling plan or sampling process is selection of a sampling method, which will depend on the objectives of the study. Also, it depends on the financial resources available and the time limitations and the nature of the problem under investigation. The major alternative sampling method can be grouped under two headings: probability sampling methods and non-probability sampling methods. Probability sampling method and non-probability sampling methods are two broad categories of sampling methods. Each of these categories contains a large number of sampling methods, as we will discuss later. What's meant by probability samples? It means samples in which every element in the population has a known non-zero likelihood of selection. Another definition, or in other words, it can be defined as sample in which every element of the population has equal chance of being selected in a sample. In this category of sampling, we select sample elements randomly from the whole population. We select the elements randomly. While in non-probability samples in which specific elements from the population have been selected in a non-random manner, which mean we don't apply randomization in selecting the sample from the population. The fourth step or the fifth step in the sampling process is determining sampling size. Once a sampling method has been chosen, the next step is to determine the appropriate sample size. However, with probability samples, researcher uses formulas. Researcher use statistical formulas to calculate the sample size required. So we depend on statistical methods to calculate the suitable sample size given target level of acceptable error and level of confidence. The last step in the sampling process is developing operational procedure for selecting sample elements. The final step in the sampling process is execution of the operational sampling plan. This step requires adequate checking to ensure that specific procedures are followed. Let's explain in more details the probability sampling methods. This category of sampling contain other methods or a lot of methods to select samples randomly. The first type of sampling under this category called simple random sample. Simple random sample is a probability sample selected by assigning a number to every element of the population and then using a table of random number to select specific elements for inclusion in the sample. For example, if there is a competition between our students in the management course, we will select from the students, for example, 10 elements randomly from the list of their names. Other type of sampling called systematic sampling. Systematic sampling, it is a probability sampling in which the entire population is numbered and elements are selected using a skip interval. The main advantage of this type of sampling is that it is cost-saving method of sampling. Also, systematic sampling is often simpler, less time-consuming, and less expensive to use than simple random sample. The greater danger lays in the possibility that hidden patterns within the population list may advertently be pulled into the sample. For example, if we used the frame of our students' names, we can select 10 of them as a sample, but not not randomly like the first sampling method, but we will select the fifth student in the list of their names, which means we will select the fifth student and the 10th student and we will add 5 and select the required student according to equal intervals. The third type of sampling or probability sampling is stratified sample. It is a probability sample that is forced to be more representative through simple random sampling of mutually exclusive and exhaustive subsets. Stratified samples are probability samples that are distinguished by the following procedural steps. The first step, the original or parent population is divided into two or more mutually exclusive subsets. For example, we can categorize or subcategorize our population into males and females. Second, simple random samples of elements from the two or more subsets are chosen independently of each other, which means we select a specific number of elements from males randomly and some specific elements of the females group randomly. Again, under the stratified sampling method, we can divide or subdivide our population into groups and select the sampling units randomly from each group, from the group of males, for example, randomly, and from the group of females randomly. The last type of probability samples is cluster sample. Cluster sample is a probability sample in which the sampling units are selected from a number of small geographic areas to reduce data collection costs. There are two basic steps in cluster sampling. The first step is defining the population of interest and dividing it into mutually exclusive and exhaustive subsets. The second step is to select randomly sample elements from the subsets or the groups of population also, the groups of population. Both stratified and cluster sampling involve dividing the population into mutually exclusive and exhaustive subgroups. However, in stratified samples, the researchers select a sample of elements from each subgroup, while in cluster samples, the researcher selects a sample of subgroups and then collects data either from all the elements in the subgroup or from a sample of the elements. In the next lecture, we will discuss the second category of sampling methods, which is non-probability sampling. We will discuss non-probability sampling methods in more details. See you next lecture.